You probably know the story of Pygmalion, right? The sculptor who falls head over heels in love with his own creation. It's this beautiful, classic myth about art literally coming to life. But what if one of the most famous details about that story, the statue's name, is something we just made up?
Yeah, I'm talking about Galatea. That's the name we all use for her. But what if I told you the ancient storytellers never called her that? Not even once. The answer to this little mystery might just change how you think about the entire myth.
So, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to go back to one of the most famous tellings of this tale, from the Roman poet Ovid. And it all starts with the man himself, Pygmalion, an artist who had pretty much sworn off love for good.
So who was this guy? Well, according to Ovid, Pygmalion was the king of Cyprus and a seriously talented sculptor. But he was also kind of cynical. He looked at the women around him and was just disgusted by what he saw as their flaws and vices. So he made a decision. He was going to stay a bachelor. Forever.
Instead of looking for a partner, he poured all that energy and passion into his work. He took a piece of flawless snow-white ivory and carved what he considered the perfect woman, a vision of beauty so pure he was convinced no real, living woman could ever compare. And then the inevitable happened. He fell completely in love with it.
And you have to understand how Ovid describes this statue. It wasn't just pretty, it was breathtakingly realistic. The art was so good you couldn't even see the art anymore. It looked, for all the world, like a real girl who was just holding perfectly still.
And this is where things get intense. His admiration quickly spirals into a full-blown obsession. He starts treating this ivory statue like a real person. He'd talk to it, bring it little gifts, seashells, flowers, jewelry. He'd dress it up in real clothes. He even laid it in his bed at night, calling it his bed companion. He was all in on this fantasy, just desperate for it to be real.
Now, a love this powerful, even for a statue, can't just stay bottled up. The whole story pivots during a huge festival for Venus, the goddess of love. For Pygmalion, this was it. This was his one shot at a miracle.
So he's standing there at the altar, making his offering, but when it's time to pray, he chokes. He's too shy, too embarrassed to actually ask for what he wants. He can't bring himself to say, "Please make my statue come to life." Instead, he prays for a wife who is simply like his ivory woman. It's a careful, timid little wish. But come on, you can't fool the goddess of love. Venus was right there and she heard the words he didn't say. She knew exactly what he was really asking for. As a sign, a little wink to let him know she heard him. The flame on the altar leaped up 3 times.
Can you just imagine him running home after that? He must have been buzzing with this crazy mix of hope and fear. He gets back to his workshop, goes right to the statue, and he kisses her. But this time, something's different. Her ivory lips, they feel warm.
And Ovid's description here is just wow. He says that as Pygmalion touches her, the hard ivory starts to soften under his fingers. It gives way like beeswax warming up in the sun. He feels a pulse. It's actually happening.
And just like that, the transformation is complete. The statue is now a living, breathing woman. She blushes, and she slowly opens her eyes. And in that very first moment of her new life, she sees 2 things at once: the sky above and the man who loved her into existence right in front of her.
What a story, right? But it brings us right back to our big question. We just went through that whole incredible miracle, and not once did we say her name. So let's finally solve this little mystery. Okay, here's the big reveal. In Ovid's telling of the story, the one we've been following, the statue is completely 100% nameless. He just calls her the Ivory Maiden or the Girl. The name Galatea is nowhere to be found.
So, if she wasn't Galatea, then who was? Well, in Greek mythology, Galatea was a totally different person. She was a nereid, a sea nymph, and she had her own whole dramatic love story going on with a guy named Assus and a jealous Cyclops. It's a completely separate myth.
In fact, Ovid actually writes about the nymph Galatea in a different part of his book. She shows up in other ancient works too. The name Galatea only got tacked onto Pygmalion's statue much later in history, centuries after these stories were first written down.
So let's think about this. The woman at the heart of this story was originally a nameless figure, a kind of perfect blank slate. So how did this tale, with its anonymous heroine, manage to stick with us for thousands of years?
Well, its real power is in the idea behind it.
This is a story all about that complicated, fascinating relationship between a creator and their creation. It gets you thinking about art, obsession, and that very human desire to make reality match our ideals. It's that core concept that has inspired so many other works, like George Bernard Shaw's famous play, Pygmalion.
And so, that leaves us with one last thing to think about. Does knowing she didn't have a name actually change the story for you? Is the myth somehow more powerful when she isn't Galatea, but is just a pure, unnamed ideal brought to life? Is she more of a symbol than a person? Something to chew on.